Ecclesiastes chapter 3 begins this way. There's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, a time to gather them. A time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. Now, that list in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, which many of you probably know by heart if you knew the old Birds version of that, the song the Birds sang years ago, that list, which is fairly long, it barely scratches the surface of human activity. I mean, you could add so many things to this list, right? I mean, there's a time to what? Sleep. And a time to wake up. There's a time to work, and there's a time to rest. There's a time to buy. There's a time to save, and on and on and on. You see, you could just continually could add to this list. There's a time, it says, and there's a season for every activity under the heavens. Well, these days, especially yesterday for our trunk or treat, and this coming Thursday, which is Halloween, well, for a lot of folks, these are times to dress up, to role play, to perhaps don a mask and pretend you're something that you're not. Putting on a costume, having a little fun, pretending you're someone or something you're not for an event or for a party, well, I think that's okay, right? You probably do too. I mean, those people who came to our church's trunk or treat yesterday, they found some of our kids, and they found some of our grown-ups in costume. They found this guy, wearing an Indiana Jones costume. Now, personally, I enjoyed coming up with the costume and the trunk set up. You could even say I had fun doing it. Now, seeing me in an Indiana Jones outfit yesterday at our trunk or treat, and oh, by the way, I want to quickly say thanks to everybody who came and helped with this year's trunk or treat. You helped us to make some kids happy and to show the community that, our love for Jesus here has us loving the kids and the families of our community. So if you helped in any good way, thank you. It was a good thing. Anyway, as I was saying, if you saw me dressed like Indiana Jones at our trunk or treat, that was no big deal, right? I mean, that's nothing weird or unusual about that. But if you find me wearing it on Thursday, you'd probably think the same thing. It's Thursday's Halloween. Nothing weird, nothing unusual, no big deal about that. But if you came this morning and you watched me walk up on stage in my Indiana Jones costume and start preaching, you'd think, no, that's a little unusual. That's a little strange. That's a little different. If you saw me this week wearing my Indiana Jones costume on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you begin to think, that's weird. If every time you saw me from this day forward, I was in that costume, you'd think, the guy's lost touch with reality, right? You see, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. There's a time for costumes. There's a time for wearing masks. There's a time for pretending. And there's a time to remove the mask and be real. It's this wearing of mask, this pretending, and the removal of mask and being real. That's what I want to talk about this morning. Only I'm not talking about the wearing of mask and the pretending that goes along with Halloween. I'm talking about the wearing of mask and the pretending that we so often do in our relationships with one another. You see, we're in this sermon series called Healthy Relationships. And I believe in order for you and I to have healthy relationships, to have relationships that thrive and become what God designed them for be in our individual lives and as a church body, we've got to be able to lower the mask that we so often hide behind, and we've got to be able to stop pretending that we're something we're not. I mean, let's get real about our relationships and the way we interact with other people for just a couple moments here. Sometimes we hide behind a mask. I mean, sometimes we pretend to be something we're not. And you all know that's true, right? I mean, we do it. I mean, sometimes we do it because we understand it to be the social norm. I mean, take, for example, our interactions with other people just in greeting them, all right? Say you're greeted by somebody at the grocery store, and they say something to you like, "Oh, hi, good morning, how are you?" We all know what the expected response is, right? I mean, the expected response is, what? I'm fine. Yeah, everybody knows I'm fine. And how about you? And then, of course, we expect him to respond by saying, "Hey, I'm fine too, thanks. Have a great day." And then we turn around and say, "Hey, you have a great day." And then we go back to doing what we were doing, right? That's the social norm. That's what's expected of us. More often than not, we even do that in greeting one another at church. I mean, what do you think would happen if, say, someone, just out of being friendly, greeted you at the store, and they said something like, "Hi, how you doing today?" Just suppose what would happen if instead of saying, "I'm fine, how about you," you responded with, "Oh, I'm not having a very good day at all. I mean, I'm tired. I didn't get much sleep last night. I've got this pounding headache at the moment, and I'm stressing out over some bills that I just need to pay, but I don't have the money to pay. I've got this cavity that's driving me crazy, giving me fits, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to afford to get that taken care of. And besides that, there's the car. I've got car trouble, and who knows what it's going to cost to fix the car. And besides that, my family doctor says I'm depressed, and he wants to send me to a therapist." Can you imagine if you answered the other person like that, their response? I mean, they're going to be inching away from you, and they're going to turn and they're going to hightail it away from you as fast as they possibly can because they're thinking, "This is some kind of a psycho. That's not what you do." And if it's you were on the other foot, if you greeted somebody and instead of answering you, with, "Yeah, I'm fine, how are you?" they were to do that, you'd probably do the same thing. You'd probably be thinking to yourself, "That was weird." Our wearing masks, our pretending to be or our pretending to be feeling something we're not at the moment, you know as well as I do that there's a social pressure for us to do those things at times. And so we oftentimes, I think, go through life and we put up false fronts. We pretend to be feeling things we're not feeling. We act like everything's okay when deep down inside of us, we're not feeling like everything is okay. We do that not only in public when we're greeted by someone at the store or at the post office or passing them on the street, but we sometimes do that in private settings. Small group settings, family holiday gatherings. Sometimes we do it with our best friends, our spouses, our kids. We wear those masks. We hide our true feelings. We pretend we like something we don't. We laugh at jokes that we really don't think are funny. We do other things like that at times because we know that's what's socially expected. But we hide behind those masks. And we pretend for other reasons too, don't we? Not just because it's socially accepted. We sometimes, I think, do it out of fear. Maybe we're afraid to let somebody see us as we really are because we're afraid if they really knew who we are or what we are like, they might reject us. And we just don't want to experience that. And so instead of being real with them, we're pretending with them. Maybe we hide behind a mask of words. Maybe we don't let somebody really get to know the real us because we're not sure we can fully trust them. Maybe we fear that if they knew the truth about us, they might use it against us in some hurtful way, that they might go out and gossip about us. And that's a reality. I mean, it happens. I mean, Proverbs 20, verse 19 warns us about that possibility. But that's just another one of those reasons we sometimes hide behind a mask. Maybe we mask our feelings and our struggles. We just don't let people in on what's really going on in our lives because we don't want to burden them. I mean, sometimes, somebody will approach us and they'll ask, hey, how's your day going? And it's really maybe not going very well at all, but we don't want to tell them because we look at them and we happen to know a little bit about their life and we know they're going through some struggles that way outweigh our own. And so we just think, I don't want to share this with them. I don't want to burden them any more than they're already burdened. Now, all of those are reasons, all those reasons that I've shared with you so far as to why we sometimes put on these masks and pretend to be something or someone we're not, they're all, I think, somewhat innocent or somewhat self-protective or they've got caring reasons behind our doing those things. But there are also some not so innocent reasons. People will do those things. We'll put on the mask and we'll pretend. Sometimes people put on masks. Sometimes they pretend to be someone or something else that they're not because they are intentionally trying to be deceptive. Maybe they're trying to deceive others because they're wanting to take advantage of them. I mean, isn't that what scammers do? Call you on the phone or whatever. They'll pretend that they're with some company that you are already doing business with. And to pretend that they've got your best interest at heart when really what are they after? Your money. Sometimes people will pretend, they're someone they're not for not so good reasons like that. And like the Pharisees. If you read the New Testament in the first 4 Gospels where you read about the first 4 books of the New Testament which talk about the life of Jesus and his interactions with the Pharisees, you find that Jesus accused them of pretending to be something that they weren't because they wanted to get and keep positions of power. Jesus called them hypocrites. By the way, the word hypocrite, it's a Greek word that comes from the Greek theater where an actor would hold a mask in front of his face. To pretend to be the mask instead of himself. He would pretend to be whatever he was holding up in the front of him on that mask. And Greek actors, they were all male, and sometimes they would hold a female mask, and the guy would pretend he was the woman. But they would pretend whatever the mask was. That's what a hypocrite is a person pretending to be something that they're not. And Jesus said the Pharisees that they were hypocrites, that they pretended to be these. Their mask was the mask of being a super spiritual person. And he says, you guys are wearing this mask of being a super spiritual person. And you're trying to give everybody the impression you're just a super spiritual person. On the outside, he says, you look like that. You look good. You've got that impression. And you leave that impression with people. He goes, but I know deep down in your heart, you're far from that. You're nothing like that at all. He said, on the inside, he said, I'll tell you what you're like. He says, on the outside, you're like a whitewashed tomb. But on the inside, you're like that same tomb. You're full of rottenness and filth and death. Now, the thing is, it really doesn't matter. If we're talking about someone's masking their emotions and hiding their true selves out of fear of rejection or pretending that there's something they're not to be intentionally deceptive, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to our relationships with people, especially our relationships with the people that we are closest to, if we constantly hide behind a mask, if we're constantly pretending to be something that we're not, it is impossible, you see, for us to have the healthy, strong, growing relationships that God created for us to have. There's a time, there's a season for every activity under heaven. And that means there's a time we need to lower the mask. There's a time we need to let our true selves be seen. There's a time we need to let our feelings, our real feelings, be heard. If you were here and you heard the first sermon in this series, you know that I shared with you that we can't possibly get our horizontal relationships with people right until we first get our vertical relationship with God right. And the reasons, friends, we can't get our horizontal relationships with others right without first getting this vertical relationship with God right is that we can't get the internal relationship with our own self right until we first get that vertical relationship with God right. It's after we get the relationship with God right that we can begin to see ourselves rightly and think of ourselves rightly and deal with ourselves rightly. And then after that, then we can begin to deal with other people rightly. I'm not a professional counselor, but I read a lot of professional counselors' books, and I can tell you right now, they will tell you if you're not right in here, you're not going to be right out there. And we're not going to be right in here if we're not first right here. The same thing. I think you can take that same stuff and apply it to this lowering of mask and our being totally open and honest. We first have got to lower the mask and be totally open with God. Now, if we know and believe what's taught in the Bible, we realize it's pointless to try to hide anything from God. Because we understand that the Bible teaches us, God knows all there is to know about us. God knows exactly who we are behind all the masks that we might try to hide behind. When I talk about our coming clean before God, our lowering our mask before God, what I'm really talking about is our confessing to God what He already knows. And what I'm really talking about is our coming to terms with things that we have been doing and feeling, especially those things that we have been avoiding talking to God about in our prayers, and becoming totally open and honest. And moving past the embarrassment and the shame that we have for these things and these feelings and these thoughts we have, and just laying them all out on the table and talking to God about them, so that we can experience the forgiveness and the love and the total acceptance of us that He wants us to experience in our relationship with Him. And I think it's in the process of our doing that, our coming clean before God, our lowering the mask, and our just laying it all out on the table and being totally open with God. It's in the process of our doing that, I think, that we are forced to identify to ourselves the mask that we've been hiding behind or using. In the process of coming clean before God, we make ourselves acknowledge our own true thoughts, our feelings about things we do and things we fear and things we face. And I believe when we do those things, God can work through them to help us to become spiritually healthy and whole as an individual on the inside. If you've not done that, you need to do it. And if you did it once a long time ago, you need to do it again. This is actually something that we need to do constantly. Coming clean before God. Communion, by the way, is one of those times during the week that if you haven't done it throughout the week, it's a great time to do that. Just in those moments to really totally come clean before God. But we need to do that. If you have never gotten around to coming clean before God, totally being completely open and honest and just admitting to Him and talking to Him about all your fears and your hang-ups and your struggles, if you've never really done that, if the very thought of that, just creates anxiety for you, there is a book I would think you might find very helpful. It's a book called Life's Healing Choices. Life's Healing Choices. It's written by John Baker. But there's 2 chapters in that book. Man, his chapters of letting go and coming clean, they really speak to this idea of you and I just losing the mask and admitting our spiritual struggles and coming clean before God. You see, again, for you and I to have the courage to lower our mask in our closest relationships with others, and for us to go about doing that wisely, I'm convinced first we've got to get rid of the mask in our relationship with God, and we've got to come to terms with ourselves as to who we are and who we are in His sight. And then we'll be able to relate to others and be honest with others the way that God intends for us to be. See, the Bible makes it very clear that God wants us to practice honesty in all of our relationships. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 11 admonishes us not to deceive one another. Zechariah, if you're taking notes, 8:16 instructs us to speak the truth to each other. Paul, in Colossians chapter 3, verses 9 and 10, he outlines some rules there for holy living, including these. Do not lie to each other, since you've taken off your old self with its practices, and you've put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge of the image of its creator. I'll tell you what, I'm really impressed. I'm impressed and challenged both by the openness and the honesty of the Apostle Paul. And I say that because while a lot of us have trouble confessing our true feelings and our struggles with sin to even one person, Paul owned up to those things to entire groups of people. Paul admitted to the Corinthians that when he came to them in weakness and fear. That's 1 Corinthians 2:3. He wrote to the Romans this amazingly candid passage about his ongoing struggle, this constant struggle that he had with sin. And you can read about that in Romans chapter 7. Paul demonstrated in his own life the honesty that he recommends to other people. When it comes to this lowering the mask thing and our being more open and honest with each other so that we have healthier and stronger relationships, something that I've come to realize, folks, is that it takes those things. It takes our lowering our mask and our being more open and honest with each other for us to be able to both give and receive the help that God intended we give and share with one another. You know, the Bible's got a lot to say about how Christians are to treat one another. I mean, we're told to bear with each other in Colossians 3:13. We're told to encourage one another, to build each other up. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. We're told to love each other deeply from the heart. 1 Peter 1:22. We're told to accept one another. Romans 15:7. We're told to instruct one another. Romans 15:14. But listen, how can people support us? How can they encourage us? How can they accept us? How can we accept them? How can we encourage them? How can we support them if we hide behind some kind of a mask and we pretend to be fine all the time when things aren't always fine for us? Sandy Shepard shares in her article, Removing the Mask We Wear, this personal story. She writes, "A few years ago, I discovered the benefits of unmasking my struggles." That was weird. She writes, I discovered the benefits of unmasking my struggles. My husband, Rick, suffers from this chronic illness affecting every area of our family life. And during an especially difficult week, I pushed my grocery cart through the aisle of our local supermarket and met Deb, a woman from another church. She asked how things were going. Surprising myself, I responded, "Not too well." And she questioned me further, and I told her about our struggles with Rick's illness. And then stepping closer to me, she asked, "May I pray for you right now?" Speechless, I nodded, and she took my hand. And she prayed for us right in the aisles as I wept silently. I had been a ministry wife for 19 years, and I couldn't remember anyone ever doing this for me before. Deb asked if she could tell her prayer group about our problems, and the following week, the entire group stopped by our house to pray for our family. And after they left, Rick and I hugged each other with tears, overwhelmed by their care and concern. Because I had allowed myself to be vulnerable with one person, God brought a whole group of Christians to pray for us. You know, I appreciate Shepard's openness and honesty. And what happened to her and for her and with her and in her happened during that tough time of her life, you see, only because she was willing to lower her mask and open up and admit her struggle with another believer. When we keep, friends, all of our hang-ups and our hurts and all of our sorrows and our sins and all of our trials and our temptations to ourselves, we keep ourselves and we keep others from receiving the blessings and being the blessing that God intended. Something that may surprise you is that confession often breeds confession. And what I mean by that is The willingness of one person to admit their struggles often has this ripple effect because others, in hearing or witnessing the courage of that first person to lower their mask and share their struggle, they are often emboldened to share their own. It's as if suddenly they feel like they've been given permission to share what they've been privately carrying along as a burden for so long. In Celebration of Discipline, Richard Foster speaks to this matter of Christians confessing their struggles and their sins and their burdens with other Christians. He writes this: confession is a difficult discipline for us because we all too often view the believing community as a fellowship of saints before we see it as a fellowship of sinners. We imagine that we're the only ones who haven't stepped onto the high road, onto the high road to heaven. But if we know that the people of God are first a fellowship of sinners, we're free to hear the unconditional call of God's love and to confess our needs openly before our brothers and sisters. I like how Foster wrote that we imagine we're the only ones who haven't stepped onto the high road of heaven. Friends, that's just another way of saying a lot of times we just don't share our struggles or our problems with others because we think, that we're alone in them. That everybody else has got their life, together, or they got their act together, or everybody else has figured out how to handle things. But I'm going to let you in on the truth, folks, okay? The truth is none of us here has our act fully together. We're all a bunch of sinners, right? And yes, we are forgiven sinners if we're following Jesus Christ. But the reality is we're still a bunch of sinners. We're all a bunch of imperfect people who haven't reached perfection yet. None of us has it all together. And God doesn't want us to go it alone. He wants us to be there for each other. He wants us to love each other. He wants us to accept each other for who we are, what we are, and where we are in life. This is true for the church. This is also true for Christian marriages. It's true for Christian families. It's true for Christian friendships. Okay? Given the ages of most of the people in this room, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of you are familiar with the 80s, 90s sitcom Cheers. I don't remember the entire theme song of the show, but there are a few lines from it that have stuck with me through the years. I'm not going to sing them, but I will tell you, the situational comedy Cheers, as you might guess, even if you've never watched the show, as you might guess, it's centered around the lives of different people that frequented this neighborhood bar. And in the theme song of that show, as they sang the praises of that bar and what took place there and the people who went there, they sang these lines. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. Can I let you in on something? There are bars, friends. There are bars out there that offer a truer and better fellowship than you can find in some churches. The words of that song describe, you see, what the human heart hungers for. Acceptance and feelings of belonging. And some bars are better at giving people those things than some church congregations. And that is sad. That is so, so sad. That's not how it should be. Church bodies ought to excel in being places of acceptance and places that people get the feeling, I belong. And when people come to this place, when a first-time guest steps out of their car into the parking lot, when they walk through the entry doors of this place, I believe Jesus wants this to be the kind of place, and I believe He wants us to be the kind of people that others feel accepted and they get that sense of belonging from moment one. However, I'm going to add something to this because, you see, that's not all we should offer people as a church. This shouldn't be the kind of place where people come and feel that, they and everything about them is accepted as they are at the moment and nothing different is ever going to be expected of them. No. That, friends, that is not what church is all about. Church is not all about stamping okay to you and everything that you ever do in your life. The church is about accepting one another as we are. I mean, that's what Jesus does. The Bible lets us know we come to Him, He accepts us as we are. But understand this, accepting someone as they are isn't the same thing as desiring for them to stay the way they are. Jesus accepts us as we are. But understand this, His desire in accepting us and receiving us is to change us, to lead us to living a more holy and God-honoring life. And that should be the same desire that churches have for the people that God sends their direction. It should be to accept them and to love them as they are when they come, but at the same time to desire for them that they will become more like Jesus and live more holy and God-honoring lives. We are to be there, friends, for each other, and we are to be there to help each other accomplish those things. And we're to be there for others who God might send our direction to do those things. But getting back to this matter of being more open and honest in our relationships, the reality is we can't help each other if we're not aware of each other's needs. There needs to be an openness and honesty between us, among us. I want to challenge you this morning. I want to challenge you this morning to do three things. Three things I think that'll help us all to have healthier and stronger relationships. The first challenge is this, to be a confessional type of person. To be the type of person that doesn't give people the idea, oh, they've got it all together. To let people know, to identify with them, say, I struggle, to make it known. Hey, I have difficulty with this sometimes. I tell a lot of people, I do a lot of confessional preaching because I don't want people to get the impression that, I've got it all together when I don't have it all together. I want people to know, man, I struggle with you, like you. Sometimes I have difficulty, receiving and accepting some of the things of God. I mean, some things are hard. And sometimes I don't understand, and I confess those things. Do I struggle with sin? Absolutely. And so I think we all need to be willing to do this because as a result, again, it makes us vulnerable and it begins to open up the opportunity for us to encourage each other, support each other, accept one another, help each other, love on each other. I think we need to be more confessional. I think we need to be confidence-keeping people. One of the worst things that can happen, I think, in a relationship is for someone to go to somebody and become vulnerable to them and to share a struggle, as particularly if it's a struggle with sin. To share that in confidence with somebody and then to hear about it later because that person went out and started talking about it. We need to choose carefully who we confide in. But if you've been chosen and you're a follower of Jesus, man, make sure you keep the confidence. People will tell you, and historically there's been people who's like, oh, I thought you told your wife. I said, no. There were people who were surprised that everything that they tell me, I don't tell my wife. I figure, hey, it's enough for me to guard my own mouth. I don't want to have to tell somebody else and worry about them guarding theirs. I don't want to put that burden on somebody else. We need to be confidence-keeping people. And most of all, we need to be compassionate people. We need to be the kind of people that others not only feel they can come to because we're not above them. They don't get the feeling that we feel we're above them. That they can come to us because they realize, hey, that person's going to, they're not going to go out and blab what I've just talked to them about, but also they can come to us knowing that we care. We really care about them. We need to be the kind of people that others feel like they can come to and ask for help. I always remember this story, and I love the story that Charles Swindoll shares about something during Thomas Jefferson's presidency. that took place. He talks about how he and this group of travelers were crossing a river that had overflowed its banks, and each man crossed on horseback, fighting for his life. Well, there was this lone traveler, he tells about, that watched this group, going across this treacherous river, who asked President Jefferson to take him across. And the president agreed without hesitation, and the man climbed on, and the two made it safely to the other side of the river. And when they got to the other side of the river, somebody asked him, well, why did you ask the president for that favor? And the guy was shocked. He said, I had no idea that was the president. He said, all I know is when I looked around, on some of your faces, the answer was no, and on his, the answer was yes. And so I approached him. We need to have yes faces that let other people know you have a problem, you have a struggle. You're dealing with something. You can come and talk to me. You can come. I care about you. This is a part of what we're called to do as followers of Jesus.